Hello, I'm Ben Thompson, and this is the School of the U.S. Constitution number 3. And before we get into talking more about the in-depth philosophy of the U.S. Constitution, there's one other thing that we need to talk about. We've talked about the history, we've talked about force, and now we're going to talk about something that is a danger to our nation and to the Constitution. And this is communism. Now, under a constitutional system, communism has no place, because it is the exact opposite. The two cannot exist together. One will have to defeat the other. And so that's the problem we're having now. Now, the reason why I decided to bring up this topic at this point in time is because a lot of my peers do not understand what communism is. Or they understand what communism is, but only worry about it overseas. Now, people look at communism, they think of North Korea and China and Cuba, and think about these oppressive systems. And that's right, they are definitely oppressive. They are what we call the extremes. But just because a nation lacks extreme methods does not mean that it is not communist. And by all definitions, as you will see, America has become a communist nation. Some of you may not believe that, some of you may be happy about it. But I tell you that it is true, and that to those of you who are happy about that, you're going to see a world of hurt come upon this nation because of it. Now, to better understand communism, let's understand its source. When we think of communism today, we think of Karl Marx. He is one of the primary people whose writings were used to move the communist movement in the mid-1800s. I believe it was 1850, around that time. But communism was not an idea that originated with Karl Marx. Karl Marx was actually part of a group that's called the League of the Just. This group was made up by wealthy bankers and other political and royalty-based people, and they had a goal in mind. They wished to subjugate the entire world underneath their lineage. They wished to destroy all political institutions, all social institutions, and all religious institutions. And they believed that by doing this, they could recreate what they deemed a new world order. Now, the League of the Just is not their original name. That's one of their front names, because earlier, their real name got exposed, and they changed it. This group was founded by Adam Weishaupt and Lord Mayor de Rothschild. And Lord Mayor de Rothschild is one of the richest men, well, his family is one of the most wealthiest families on the earth today. And you may have heard of them, the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds have for the past, since the late 1700s, been scheming to bring all political institutions under their control through banking power. And that's what communism is. It is a lie designed to get the people to enslave themselves to the state, and the state's enslaved to the international bankers. And there's a really excellent book, if you'd like to learn more about that, called The Naked Capitalist, and it'll describe to you how the communists are in fact controlled by international banking powers. Now this group, that later on became known as the League of the Just, was originally termed Illuminati, which means holder of the light, and they believed that they could control all social, political, and religious institutions and unite them under their cause to create a new world order where they themselves will rule over mankind. But again, the idea of communism does not originate with them. It is even far older. The earliest recorded dates of a communist ideal can be traced back to the Greek philosophers of the old times, Plato. They believed that through social engineering they could create a perfect society where there was no the modern religious institutions were gone, the political and social institutions were gone, and that they themselves could create this society based on their own intelligence. But under a constitutional system, we know that that is a false idea and can never be achieved. In fact, the word communism isn't actually possible according to their own beliefs. You see, we have the communism is the end goal. Communism is a system where all property is shared and everything is communal and there's no government. Now if you notice, all of these nations that claim to be communists still have their political structure. This is because it was never designed to work. For this reason, a nation starts out socialist. Socialism is the word we should be using because communism is impossible. Communism will come about after socialism comes about, and the dictatorships of socialism will disappear magically when the society is ready to convert to real communism. But as you know, no government willingly gives up its power usually without a lot of bloodshed. So the goal of Karl Marx and others who believe in this false philosophy have to get the nations to believe in socialism. Now, are we a socialist nation? And I'm sure a lot more of you would agree that yes, we are definitely socialists, and some of you would think that's a good idea, others would think that's not a good idea. Now, Karl Marx wrote a book that we have called The Communist Manifesto, and it lists 10 major points for a socialist nation, and we call these the 10 planks of communism. The first plank is the abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to public purposes. So what is this? This is the idea that the government needs to own all the land in the nation. Now, is this true today? The 14th Amendment to the Constitution was added, which has greatly reduced the control of property in the hands of people. We have the property tax, which is in itself makes us serfs on our own land. It was never intended to have a property tax. The property tax is what the government does, saying, alright, we'll let you keep your property, but you have to rent it from us. That is because they believe now in the abolition of all property in the hands of private people, and that all property is owned by the government. Therefore, if you hold the deed to your land and you're paying property taxes, you do not really own your land. It is property of the government. Plank number 2, a heavy progressive or graduated income tax, which means that we would have heavier taxes and more taxes, and the purpose of these taxes was to get rid of private property. And as we see with the 16th Amendment, we have been more and more taxes. And our wealth is being taken for this communist, socialist idea that we cannot have private property. All property must be in the hands of the state. Plank number 3, abolition of all right of inheritance. Now, this has come about. We call it inheritance taxes. It also happens whenever, if somebody dies and don't leave a will, the government automatically takes their property, and you have to fight horrible legal battles to get it out of the hands of the state. This is because of this third plank. The government wants to control all inheritance because they don't believe you have a right to have private property. Number 4, confiscation of the property of all immigrants and people in opposition to the state. We see more and more of this coming true. A lot of the heavy excessive fines put upon immigrants when they are trying to come over here legally is so that is for the purpose of confiscating their property. More and more we are seeing that if people are trying to leave the country, then they're fines and heavily taxed. It's the same idea. A lot of people are trying to flee and get their money out of the country, but when they do that, the government takes taxes off of it. Finally, number 5, centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank, the state capital, and exclusive monopoly. This came about in 1913 with the creation of the Federal Reserve Bank. The Federal Reserve Bank is not a government institution. It is a private bank. The Congress does not have any real control over it. That's why the Federal Reserve Bank will not allow the Congress to look over its books. Then of course you say, well, they choose who's in charge. No, what happens is that the Federal Reserve Bank nominates its candidate, puts it for the Congress, and Congress approves it. The purpose of let's say we got the Morgans and the Chase and all those people who controlled the growing banks in the United States in the early 1900s, and they purposefully crashed the market. This was to scare the people into saying that, hey, if you don't let us create a central bank, then you will have more of these economic crashes. But as we see, since the creation of the Federal Reserve, we have been in a constant, ever-growing state of debt. The reason behind that is not only because of the taxes that come about through that, it is because of they charge us for every dollar we get from them. And of course, they charge us because they're a private bank. I don't know the exact rate, but let's say just for example's sake, you got, for every $1 that we get from them, they charge us $1.05. Now, what does this mean? This means we can never ever repay that debt, because the only way we get money is from them, and because they are always charging us that extra bit, we will never ever be able to pay it off. And it was designed to do that for the purpose of crashing this economy, so that they could recreate their political, social, and religious order. The communists are not doing it for the poor people. They are being moved to act by these international banks for the purpose of enslaving all people underneath their political institutions that they control. Number 7. Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state, the bringing into cultivation of wastelands and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with the common plan. Now, this is talking about a state-controlled means of production. Now, this has not fully come into effect yet, but it is ever growing more and more. And this is by the government inserting its regulations over these industries. Now, probably one of the best examples of this is in our agriculture. Our farming system is being so heavily influenced by so many different departments within the government. We got they control everything that the farmers do, basically. And then they even pay farmers not to use their land. That's because they're trying to control the market. They don't want to have too much. Small farms are disappearing, and the reason for this is that these big, huge, monopoly-controlled farms are taking over. These huge farms are controlled by the same corporations that are also controlled by these international banking powers. Equal obligation of all to work. This is number 8. The establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. So this is that they want to require everybody to work. Now, this hasn't fully come into effect yet, but it may be getting there. We have more and more people are becoming reliant on the government through Social Security, through food stamps, through all types of things. And the more and more that grows, eventually they're going to say, hey, we got so many people on this, we need to start taking control of labor. Now, when that happens, which was the previous one, controlling the means of production, they're going to fill those people with the people who are on the food stamps and other reasons. And by that means, they will have a state-controlled labor, and everybody who's on the payroll, will be required to work. Number 9. Combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population over the country. Now, this first part is the combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries. Now, we're seeing that already. But it's not being done by force of government, it's being done through a monopoly corporation. A lot of the people who've control the farms also control the manufacture of other stuff. And in fact, a lot of the toxic waste from the manufacture goes and gets put on the agriculture for the purpose of fertilizing and doing stuff with the soil, even though it's harmful to people. And now this next part is the gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country. What happened here is that everybody was living in the countryside, and they didn't like that, because people who can farm are independent, and they don't want that. So what they did is that they took all those farmers, killed part of them. This is in Russia and China. Killed part of them. The other part put in the cities. Now, of course, we don't have an extreme example over here, but what we are seeing is the small farming communities are disappearing. I know that for a fact because I was in Nebraska for 2 years doing missionary work for the people, and I saw with my own eyes day after day as those small farming towns were disappearing and everybody was leaving to go to the cities. And you think, well, that's just a coincidence. Well, no. They're taking away the youth out of those towns and bringing them into the city, giving them worthless degrees, and then putting them in little shops in the city, and thinking that they're going to become rich. When in fact, it should be the other way around. They should stay in their farming communities and develop better farms. And finally, and most important, is free education for all children in public schools. You could also read government schools. Abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, and combination of education with industrial production. Now, a child's first lesson must begin at home. And the reason for that is because you need to teach your child the ways of this society. Now, if you're not willing to do that, you send them to the public schools, and there will be people willing to teach them, but not your values. They're going to teach them the state values. In fact, the modern school system, as we know it today, is not derived from the ancient forms of school, which taught the 7 liberal arts. Our modern school system are based on the same schools used in Nazi Germany to propagandize the children. It was used in the Soviet Union. It is still used in China and North Korea. These are the same type of schools that are now in our children's lives. They are teaching our children to hate the Constitution, to hate religion. They are teaching children that government is good, government will save you, communism is for the best interest of the people. I know, I have family who work in schools. The public school system is one of the most communist organizations in this country. The teachers themselves are communists. Most of them, very few, are not. There's a few good, but most of them are communists, teaching their children to despise the Constitution. That's why I say do not trust the public schools. They are not there to help you. They are there to push this socialist agenda to create a communist nation, which is in fact just a tool of the private international banking corporation monopolies to subjugate this people under the government which they control. So those are the 10 planks of communism, and as you can see, we have become a socialist nation just based on these 10 planks. Now you're asking yourself, so what? So what about socialism? It's not that big a deal. I'm going to get free stuff. Number one, it's not free. It comes from somewhere. Now, if you remember last time, we talked about that government is force. And the Constitution was designed to limit that force. Under a socialist system, force is maximized for the benefit of the collective. This is the difference between and why these two systems cannot coexist with each other. Under the constitutional system, it believes that the individual is most important. Under a communist system, it believes that the collective is most important. What's the difference? An individual is you yourself. You matter under the Constitution. No one can take away your life, liberty, and your property unless under the requirements of the Constitution. Under a socialist collective system, the collective is all that's important. And what is the collective? It is an imaginary idea. It doesn't exist. A collective is said to be all the people in the system. But that's not true. The collective is actually the idea of those who control that system. So that group of people say, hey, this group of people cannot have that. So the force used from the government will take that stuff from them. Another example of this is that, for instance, this group of people, they're not fit to live because they harm the productivity of the collective. And so they can get rid of those people, kill them. That's what they did in Russia, that's what they are doing in China, that's what they're doing in North Korea. And you know what? They are actually starting to lean and come up with ideas for this in our own nation. One example of this is the death panels. Determine when a person is old whether it is worth the resources to take care of them. That idea comes from the collective socialist idea that the majority is more important. Under a constitutional republic, we have three forms or three branches of government, all designed to watch and keep each other on the right path. Under a communist system, there is one dictator who is controlled by the international banking system. That is what our current presidency is becoming. They are ignoring Congress. Congress is just a puppet show. The Supreme Court doesn't matter. They just go along with the philosophical beliefs of the day. And the executive branch is becoming more and more powerful, and they're following the purpose of these international banking families. Under a constitutional republic, all people have a right to worship God or to not worship God as they see fit. Under a socialist idea, all religion is outlawed and mocked, and people who believe in that will be dealt with as the collective sees fit. That's why they're making light of religions. The idea, when they talk about that that religion and politics must be kept separate, they're not interpreting that correctly the way it was intended to. It was not that we should have a religious-free environment. It was that the government cannot sponsor a religion. Therefore, all groups have an equal right to be presented. Under our socialist philosophy, 0 groups are presented, because after all, religion is just a nonsense. So I hope I have better explained communism under its true form. Communism in this nation cannot coexist with the Constitution. We must either be communist, socialist, or a constitutional republic. Because if you have a mixture of the two, you have neither. And it could only go one way. I am Ben Thompson, bringing you more of the School for the U.S. Constitution. Please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you, and have a good day.